This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, can you all hear me? Just write down in the chat box if I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you dears. So we'll be beginning, thank you. Yes, so we'll be beginning with some of the free sessions that we're going to conduct. There will be a series of free sessions going on. So today we are going to begin with the first one amongst them. Since the recent exams have been done, so people are waiting for the results. So the introductory class will be done after the part one results, so that they'll be able to get oriented better regarding how the part two is all about, what are the GTGs are about. So I hope most of you are aware what are the Green Top guidelines and how we have to read them, what are the important key points and what are the highlighted points, how to go about with the charts and how to go about with the tables, how each line is going to be important. And right now, even we have to make sure we are thorough with all the percentages that are appearing, because in the recent exams also, they were asking very close by options. So we should be very much thorough with all the drugs that are mentioned in the guidelines, the charts that are being mentioned in the guidelines. So today we'll be discussing one of the important chart, the important guideline, which is frequently asked in the exam. So I welcome all of you to the RAISE Academy, and I am Dr. Rashmi Patil, the Director and Chief Mentor for the RAISE Academy. So yes, learning together, getting trained, and following good instructions and doing lots and lots of practice is going to get you success. So there's no shortcut to success. You have to practice, and the practice should be like minimum 3 times revision. First time will be understanding all the guidelines, the important points that are written in them, give a good reading, highlight all the key points. The second reading is just revision of all the key points that you have highlighted. And the third reading is very targeted, that is very close to exam that you're going to do. So here we are with the shoulder dystocia, which is the Green Top guideline number 42. It was published in March 2012. What is shoulder dystocia? It is defined as a vaginal cephalic delivery that requires additional obstetric maneuvers to deliver the fetus after the head has been delivered and genital traction has failed. So in that situation, we call this as shoulder dystocia. Now the objective diagnosis, what we are going to see, this is going to be prolongation of the head to delivery time, the body, that is more than 60 seconds it's going to take. And this is proposed, but these data are not routinely collected. But at least we know that whenever there is more than 60 seconds of a delay, in that situation, we'll be calling this as a shoulder dystocia, the head to the body delivery. This has been repeatedly asked as recall, so just remember about 60 seconds here. Now, shoulder dystocia occurs when either the anterior or less commonly the posterior fetal shoulder, it gets impacted. The anterior gets impacted at the symphysis pubis and the posterior gets impacted at the sacral promontory respectively. This is a very important chart that we are supposed to know. What are the percentages that are involved in shoulder dystocia? Overall, this 0.5% is very important because most of the guidelines have these 0.5% or 5%. So this figure is very important. So shoulder dystocia, you just remember shoulder is like S and this goes as a 5. So this is going to be the 0.58% and it can be till even the level of 0.7%. So general incidence, we are going to remember it as 0.58 to 0.7%. Coming to postpartum hemorrhage, after having shoulder dystocia, what is the incidence that the women will have the postpartum hemorrhage? Now, H is written like this. So we are going to write H like this and then put a bar in between. So 11% is for postpartum hemorrhage. So it's easy to remember now. The postpartum hemorrhage after the shoulder dystocia is going to be 11%. If we put a bar here, it's going to become H. Now, third and the fourth degree perineal tears, it should lie between 3 and 4. So this is going to be 3.8%. I hope this is very easy to remember now. The brachial plexus injury, we have two of them, so it's going to be somewhere like 2%. So 2.3 to a range of 16%, you can think about this. So brachial plexus injury is something starts with 2 because we have two of them. There is 2.3 to 16%. So somewhere between 2 to 20, in that way you can remember. So yes, now the percentages seems very easy for all of us. The incidence of S, the shoulder dystocia, should be something like S. So that is going to be 0.58% to 0.7. About the postpartum hemorrhage, it should be something like 11, and putting a bar in between, it is 11%. The third and the fourth degree perineal tear should lie between 3 and 4. So it is going to be 3.8%. There are two brachial plexus, so it's going to be 2.3 to 16%. I hope this is clear for all of you, and you are going to revise all the percentages, write down in a separate book, and make sure these key percentages you're remembering and revising again and again. Now, most of the brachial plexus injury, they resolve without the permanent disability. And fewer of them, like 10%, may have some neurological dysfunction. And in the UK, it was shown that the injury was somewhere up to 0.43 per 1,000 live births. Now, brachial plexus injury can happen even after the cesarean section. It could be 4% of the injury that has occurred after the cesarean section, and 12% of the babies with the brachial plexus injury were born after even an uncomplicated cesarean section. So damage to the plexus of the posterior shoulder. This is considered unlikely due to the action by the healthcare professional who is delivering. So remember, whenever there is something like they're going to sue in the court of law, it can happen that either it is the anterior or the posterior one. So you should remember that damage to the plexus of the posterior shoulder is considered unlikely by the action of the healthcare professional. And conventional risk factors, it is predicted that 16% of them that resulted in the morbidity of the infant. Now, 48% of the births that complicated by the shoulder dystocia occur with the infants who weigh less than 4 kg. So 4 kg, if you take a cutoff, half of them will lie that they may have a shoulder dystocia, half of them may not have shoulder dystocia. So 48% is close to your 50%, so divide this into half. So half of them, 48% of the births which are complicated by shoulder dystocia, they were less than 4 kg. So half of them were more than 4 kg. So remember, it's like 50-50. Now, this has been asked as a recall. The infants of the diabetic mother who have 2 to 4-fold increased risk of shoulder dystocia, it was compared with the infants of the same birth weight who are born to the non-diabetic mother. This is purely, we all know, because of the fat distribution that happens in a diabetic infants, and that's why they may have a shoulder dystocia compared to the same birth weight of a non-diabetic mother. Now, there are certain factors which are associated with the shoulder dystocia, and we should remember them because they've been asking in the recalls that which is not a risk factor or something like that. So this becomes very important whenever you're choosing a single best answer. So what are these? One set is the pre-labor, one set is the intrapartum. So how can we remember them? Now, the patient had previous history of shoulder dystocia. Yes, there is a 10-fold increase that now also she may have shoulder dystocia. The baby 4.5 kg, more than 4.5 kg. So what we saw cutoff was 4 kg, 50% was lying less than that and more than that. So close to 48% we have seen. Now when we see more than 4.5 kg, yes, it is going to be a risk factor. Diabetes mellitus, we have seen this. The maternal body mass index of more than 30 kg per meter square. Okay, so this is one of the BMI that you're going to note down in your books. So the BMI more than 30, it is one of the risk factor for having a shoulder dystocia. Induction of labor. So this is also an isolated finding. Now, the baby is refusing to come out. What are the intrapartum factors? And we are trying to pull out the baby and leading to shoulder dystocia here. How does the baby refuse to come out? It is prolonging the first stage of labor. The second stage gets arrested, or there is a prolonged second stage of labor. The baby is refusing here. Oxytocin augmentation. There are no contractions that is pushing the baby out. Plus, assisted vaginal delivery, that you are doing something to take the baby out. See, all these intrapartum factors, the baby was refusing to come out. We have forced the baby. So, in that situation, the baby landed up with having a shoulder dystocia. So, these are easy to remember now. Prolonged first stage, prolonged second stage. The second stage got arrested. We started using oxytocin over here and the assisted vaginal deliveries. So, these are very important for your recall questions. Please do remember them. Now, does induction of the labor prevent shoulder dystocia? What does the guidelines say? Induction of the labor does not prevent the shoulder dystocia in non-diabetic women with a suspected macrosomic fetus. Induction of labor at term can reduce the incidence of shoulder dystocia in women with the gestational diabetes. So, do you understand the difference between these two lines? So, it is a suspected macrosomic fetus in a non-diabetic women. If we try to induce the labor in order to prevent the shoulder dystocia, this does not prevent. But at the same time, the induction of labor at term, it can reduce the incidence with the mother having gestational diabetes. Now, the NICE diabetic guideline, it recommends that the pregnant women with the diabetes who have a normally grown fetus, they should be offered elective birth. So how we are going to offer them elective birth? Either by the induction of labor or by elective cesarean section if indicated after 38 completed weeks. Every word is important here in this sentence. The diabetes guideline, what it says that women with diabetes and they have normally grown fetus, they should be offered elective birth through the induction of labor or elective cesarean section, which is indicated after 38 completed weeks. So this has come as a recall. So remember, it's not 37 plus 6, it's going to be your 38 plus 0. So 38 weeks should have been completed. Now, which is another recall for us. So elective cesarean section should be considered to reduce the potential morbidity for the pregnancies, which are complicated either by a pre-existing or gestational diabetes, regardless of what treatment they are having, with an estimated weight of 4.5 kgs. Okay, so it should be considered here to reduce the potential morbidity. But if it is more than 4.5, you are going to recommend a cesarean section. So these two, the levels, these are important. The weight range, these two are important for us for the recall. Now, what is the appropriate mode of delivery for the women with a previous episode of shoulder dystocia? How we are going to counsel them? Either a cesarean section or a vaginal delivery can be appropriate after having shoulder dystocia, but the decision should be made jointly by the woman and her carers also. Now, rate of the shoulder dystocia in the women who had a previous history of shoulder dystocia, it is shown that there is 10 times higher than the rate in the general population. And the recurrence is reported between the range of 1% to 25%. However, this may be an underestimation also because there could be some selection bias. So what are we supposed to remember now? Previous history of shoulder dystocia, either the elective cesarean or the cesarean or the vaginal delivery, anything can be preferred, but the decision should be made jointly by the woman and her carers. What are we going to remember the next one? The rate of shoulder dystocia in the women. This has been repeatedly asked as a recall that previous shoulder dystocia, now she has 10 times higher risk. Now, what about the recurrence rate? It is going to be between 1% to 25%. The timely management of the shoulder dystocia, it requires prompt recognition. The attendant health carers, they should routinely observe for what of the factors now. Whenever they see these things, they should make sure that they are thinking about the baby having shoulder dystocia. What are these signs that the baby shows? First one, the delivery, there is difficulty between the face to the chin. So, difficulty with the delivery of the face and chin. The head is remaining tightly applied to the vulva or even retracting back. So, we call them as the turtleneck sign. Now, the failure of restitution of the head, the failure of shoulders to descend downwards. So, first is there is a difficulty with delivery of the face and chin. The head remains tightly applied to the vulva. This is called as turtleneck sign. There's a failure of restitution of the fetal head, and there is a failure of shoulders to descend downwards. What are we supposed to do in this situation? First thing what you're going to do is a routine traction in the axial direction. This is very important. You are going to give a traction in the axial direction. And this can be used to diagnose the shoulder dystocia, but any other traction should be avoided. No other direction. You are going to give it only in the axial direction. Now, what about episiotomy? Episiotomy will not relieve the bony obstruction of the shoulder dystocia. But why do we give it? This may be required to allow the healthcare professional to have more space to do the internal vaginal maneuvers. The use of an episiotomy, it does not decrease the risk of the brachial plexus injury also with the shoulder dystocia. So whenever this question is there, that episiotomy, why it is given? Shoulder dystocia is a bony obstruction. Episiotomy is given on the tissue. So this is not going to relieve the bony obstruction of the shoulder dystocia. But why do we give? Because we want to do certain internal vaginal maneuvers. About the percentages, yes, we all learned that the postpartum hemorrhage, it is 11, put a bar in between. The third and the fourth will be between 3 and 4, it's going to be 3.8%. And the brachial plexus injury, we have two of them, so it is between 2 to 20, so it is 2.3 to 16%. Yes. What about the algorithm? This is a very important algorithm. All of us should know this step by step, what we are going to do, because the EMQs do come from this, and each and every sentence, each and every point here is really important. How do we choose our EMQ option? So, algorithm for the management of shoulder dystocia, first thing you are going to do is call for help. Any option, whenever you have seen that the question is having a shoulder dystocia, the first thing, what is your immediate action? If they ask you, this is going to be call for help. After calling for help, whom are we calling? We are calling the midwife coordinator. We are calling additional midwifery help, the experienced obstetrician, the neonatal team, and the anesthetist. We are calling all these people for help. They'll come and they'll do their respective roles. Once you call for help, the first thing you're going to do is tell the mom not to push. Tell her that if there is some table has inclined position or something, make her lie flat. Move her buttocks to the edge of the bed. This is what you're going to do as a second step. The first step is call for help. After calling for help, please tell the mom, do not push, and make her lie flat. Move the buttocks to the edge of the bed. This is very important. So you should remember the stepwise points, because they are going to ask them in the EMQ. They'll give you different scenario. Now you called for help. What are you going to do next? So next is this point. After doing this, what are you going to do? We are going to do the McRoberts maneuver. What is that? Putting the thighs to the abdomen. By doing this maneuver, the success rate is going to be 90%. This is again a recall. So we call for help, we discourage her pushing, make her lie flat, pull the buttocks to the edge of the table, do the McRoberts maneuver, and 90% is going to be the success rate over here. The baby still it did not deliver. What are we going to do? Please give a suprapubic pressure. Choose your answer correctly. It is not fundal pressure. You are going to cause more obstruction. So no fundal pressure. It's going to be a suprapubic pressure and the axial traction is maintained. The suprapubic pressure is given in such a direction that the shoulder blade, it comes downwards. So wherever the baby is facing the maternal thigh, in that direction you are supposed to give. The shoulder blade is pushed downwards. Then you gave the suprapubic pressure. The patient did not deliver. In that situation, you are going to consider episiotomy if it will make the internal maneuvers easy. So go stepwise. They will ask you in this AMQ that this question, patient is having a shoulder dystocia, you called for help, the mother was made to lie flat and then discouraged to push, and then she was brought to the edge of table. The McRoberts maneuver was performed, the baby did not deliver, and the assistant gave a suprapubic pressure. What is your next point? What is your next line of management? If there is an option, consider episiotomy. If there is an option, internal maneuvers, we have to choose consider episiotomy, because after doing this, we are going to do this internal maneuvers. So it is not give episiotomy. This is consider episiotomy. Be very careful in choosing your words in your part 2 exam. Each and everything is important. There are various words like offer. There are various words like recommend, consider. So all these, they have certain different meaning, and RCOG is very particular about what these words mean to them. So offer is different from consider. The recommendations are different. So wherever the words are there appearing, make sure you're using them correctly. So your EMQ will have a consider episiotomy. Please do that. If not, it's an internal maneuvers. We are going to go it that way. So consider episiotomy if it is going to make the internal maneuvers easy. Now, when you gave the episiotomy, what next are you going to do? So the next point is going to be the internal rotational maneuvers. Because you gave the episiotomy, you are going to make the internal maneuvers here. So what the guideline says, try either of the first depending upon the clinical circumstances and the operator experience. So there are 3 options in your EMQ. First option is this sentence. Second option is this sentence. Third option is this sentence. So if all 3 are given, please choose this sentence. Because here they're going to tell you try either of the maneuvers and the first depending upon the clinical circumstances and the operator experience. If this option is not given, you are going to choose the internal rotational maneuvers, because we have considered episiotomy to make them easier. Please go by the internal rotational maneuvers as the next option. And afterwards, try to deliver the posterior arm. Whenever all these maneuvers have been practiced, there is an incidence that the humerus can get fractured. Now we know we have 2 bones, the 2 humerus bones, so it is going to be 2% to 12%. So remember, the fracture of humerus can happen in 2 to 12% of the women with shoulder dystocia. Now, when we are doing all these things, till that level, we are going to inform the consultant obstetrician and the anesthetist that we are trying these maneuvers, but they are not yet successful. So please be available. We may need extra help. So if the above maneuvers, they fail to release an impacted shoulder, consider all 4 position if this is going to be appropriate for her, or you are going to repeat all of the maneuvers again. So within 30 seconds, please try to repeat again all the maneuvers. So whenever we give all 4 position, the 83% of them, they deliver. So this is going to be the next step. This, or we are going to repeat everything again. The maximum time we have is 5 minutes from the head to body delivery. Otherwise, the baby is going to have the injury, the hypoxic injury to the brain. So we are making sure that within 5 minutes, all these things are complete. Now, we tried all of them, they did not succeed. In that situation, the senior consultant, they can take a decision whether they are going to consider a cledotomy, a Javanelli's maneuver, or a symphysiotomy. Any one of them they can consider here. So these are the decisions that have to be taken by the senior consultant, because these operations can be damaging. So make sure that these procedures, everything is done only by the seniors. Okay. So this will be the chart. So I hope I'm clear with all this chart of yours. So the algorithm we quickly revise now. So first thing what we are going to do is call for help. The second thing what we are going to do is discourage the mother from pushing, make her lie flat, move her buttocks to the edge of the table. The third what we are going to do is the McRoberts maneuvers. The thigh to the abdomen is placed. The success rate here is 90%. After that, it's going to be the suprapubic pressure and routine axial traction. After that, it's going to be your consider episiotomy if it will make the internal maneuvers easier. Okay. Once all these things have been done, we are going to try either of the maneuver first. Either it's going to be the internal rotational or it's going to be the delivery of posterior arm, depending upon the circumstances and the operator experience. If this is the option given, please choose this option. If it is not there, go for the internal rotational maneuvers or the delivery of the posterior arm. Now, the humerus fracture incidence in these maneuvers is detected to be 2 to 12.7%. We have 2 humerus, so it's going to be 2 to 12.7%. Now, once these maneuvers have also failed, we have to inform a senior consultant, because either we have to take them for one of these procedures. So by the time we are trying out these things again, they should be available. So inform the consultant obstetrician and the anesthetist. If the above maneuvers, they fail to release the impacted shoulder, we are going to consider all four position if this is going to be appropriate for her. This shows 83% success rate. And repeat all the maneuvers again. Now, the senior's input is required for considering a cledotomy. Javanelli's maneuver is when you place the head back into the abdomen and you take the patient for a cesarean section. Or it's going to be a symphysiotomy. So I hope all this chart, everything is clear for all of you. So quickly, there is a question for all of you. Yes, the risk of recurrence of shoulder dystocia was how? What was the incidence? How many fold? You can write in the chat box. Hello, I couldn't hear you, dear. Option E, correct. Yes, yes. So it's going to be the option E, that is tenfold. So can someone quickly tell me the incidence of postpartum hemorrhage after following leg shoulder dystocia? The postpartum hemorrhage, what I said, 11%. Very good. And the incidence of third and fourth degree perineal tear is going to be between 3 and 4. So that should be the third and the fourth degree tear. So it should be between 3 and 4. The percentage should be between 3 and 4. So it's going to be the 3.8%. Okay, this is what we learned in this chart, right? Yes, very good. So this is what we have learned in the chart. Right, so it's going to be between 3 and 4. The overall incidence is 0.5 because we are writing S as shoulder dystocia. It is 5 as in this direction we are writing. Postpartum hemorrhage, this becomes like H, and 11 and put a bar in between, this becomes hemorrhage, H. 3 and 4, so it is going to be between 3 and 4. It is 3.8%. The brachial plexus injury, we have 2 of them. So it's going to be between 2% and 16. So 2 and 20, you can think of that range. So 2.3 to 16% is going to be the brachial plexus injury. So I hope all this guideline is very simple and clear for all of you, and you can have a quick revision. So whenever you get time, just make sure every day you are revising the things and the key points in the guideline, and keep brushing all these points, and each and every sentence is going to be important from your guidelines. Nothing comes out of your guidelines and RCOG, the strategy, nothing comes out of that. So make sure your concepts are very clear and you're concentrating on all the algorithms perfectly. And these percentages, make some simple mnemonics and write down in a separate book so that you keep revising these things again and again. So thank you so much, dear. So yes, so we have started with the January 2022 batch, and we are running the courses for that. So if anyone is interested, just send a direct message to me. So we'll be involving the members over there. And happy studying, and thank you from Team Raise Academy. It was lovely having all of you. Take care. Bye. Good night, dears. Thank you so much. Thank you, dear.